Welcome to the Kim D. Snyder Show, episode number 061. Today is Friday, August 20th, 2001, and it is day 12 of my journey to seven figures as a one-woman show working 20 hours a week. And I'm going to share how to move from a monthly podcast to a daily podcast. And the business changes and decisions that I've had to make in the last 12 days has been crazy. So, first one is start. When I started my podcast in 2017, which was 4 years ago, in fact, 4 years ago last month, I did it because I knew I wanted a podcast. I love podcasts. I wanted a format that I could start reaching out while I was employee and build that following. And it was easier for me to podcast than it was for me to write. It was also in alignment in the business world, so there was going to be no conflict. I chose to do it once a month, which was more than generous. I chose to do it myself because I was an expert and I didn't want to have to worry about scheduling. And I wanted to remove all friction. Now, I haven't been consistent in that or this podcast. And part of it was I didn't have all the direction and I didn't always know where I was going and things had morphed. Also, I didn't fully make the commitment. And, the irony is that I've been posting every day on LinkedIn, but I couldn't do a monthly podcast. So there was definitely a misalignment. I'm not worried about doing videos, daily videos and blog or videos and podcasts. That doesn't bother me. It's that commitment, right? So if I hadn't have started though, 4 years ago, and my first episode was actually 6 years ago, which I haven't released yet, but started regularly or semi-regularly 4 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to get to this point because when I switched from monthly to daily, weekday, then it was easier to tweak a process than it was to restart. So the other business decision, or here's the second business decision that I had, is that it's not difficult for me to come up with the content or the ideas. The part that's taking the longest for me from switching to monthly podcast and videos to daily is the production and the syndication. I've done a few things to remove that barrier. I've, said I'm not going to edit the podcast. I'm trying to batch them, but it's still taking amount of time to process. And what the time to take to process is that I'm, creating a space on the blog and creating the links and converting it to audio and then uploading it. And it's taking time and, I'm pretty efficient. And even if I batch it, it still takes time. And that's not time that I have that is bringing me joy. And if it doesn't bring me joy to do it, I'm not going to do it. And so I have to remove the barriers of entry, which brings me to the next point. I have to be able to automate, systematize, productize, templatize, anything in order for me to do as a one-woman show. Remember, this is the criteria that I'm working towards right now. And it also means I'm making decisions not to do certain activities because I don't have them on my plate. And so as I move from monthly to daily podcast, where I've had to go is where I'm going is, this is going to be the last in this format of, 061, is I've had to remove that product or the production and the syndication. And so that will be automated. I mentioned this in my earlier day 1 or 2 podcasts, and I'm going to have to go to that route, which means I will be able to record and then upload and it will be syndicated out. And that will actually, just talking about it gives me that freedom so that I can get them out much easier for me, and then allows me the time to spend in the areas of my business that need me. And part of the areas that need me right now is to automate and systematize some of this. And that's where I want to spend the time so that when I have the availability, I can spend it with my customers. I can spend it finding the areas that will get me the biggest return for the business. So I love doing this podcast. I also am doing one for the business, and I want to bring on guests for that. So, here's the irony is that my podcast has been structured and the business one was kind of loosey-goosey, and now I'm swapping them. So go figure. But this is what happens. Like, life happens and you can change things. So that's where I'm at. The other way that this came out, and it has the business implications, is because last night I was writing down my marketing and my lead sources. So I had done that earlier in the year, but this past, 4 or 5 days ago, I ended up reworking my business plan. And now here's my plan for marketing and leads. And so what I've done on the left-hand side, I'll just kind of share with you, because when I started doing this last night and when I looked at it, that's when I was freaking out going, I cannot do this based on the current criteria. So on the left-hand side, I have month 1 and then week 1 through 4, month 2 with the weeks, and month 3 with the weeks. Then what I did is I listed across the top, I listed my marketing and my leads channel. And some of this I've done, and some of it I haven't done and I haven't spelled out. Like I haven't spelled out press releases, and they're very important. And I want to do that for the products that I'm offering and the speeches. For me, speaking and podcast guesting is huge. That's one of my number 1 lead generations. And I've been a little bit lax on that. And so that for me is a weekly activity to find those podcasts. And the more that I get on, the more it spins. So when I had done this in 2019, it's self-fulfilling. When people know that you do it, they sort of come to you. And I'm also pretty proactive. But the other areas for me for lead generation, I've been spotty at best. And, I want to do some launches and some challenges and some master classes in addition to my speaking that are a regular basis. The only way a business is going to survive is you need to have leads. Leads need to show up, and I prefer to automate that as much as I can. So again, if I can do, an hour of time and bring people in, then that's what I want to do. That's how I'm going to systematize, automate, take that busy work out of my hands so that I can spend the few hours that I want to allot working and talking to the people and helping my customers. That's where I want to. So as I continue to move through the top between my marketing and my lead generation, I get towards the right-hand columns, and that's where I have the content, because the content that I produce is also considered a form of marketing for me. I like it. I like to educate. I want people to know what it's like to work with me in my approach, and you either like it or you don't. I attract or repel, but it's a way for me to market. It's also a way for me to give back, and I like that. So when I started drawing this out and I started looking at all of the areas that I had and the things that I want to start doing with the other podcast about bringing some guests in, it's going to take a little bit more time. And so I had to make some changes. And that was the other business decision that I needed to make in order for me to continue to do the daily podcast. Now, I might be able to do 7 days a week. So I'm not going to commit to that yet. I'm going to see how the 5 days a week are. And that way I can commit to that where we're at, and we'll see how it goes. But going with this new format, I'm really excited because I feel this huge sense of relief. And so, if I didn't start, I wouldn't have something to change. And so, this is for somebody that has definitely had a podcast and it's got the process in place, then it's easier to tweak. If you're starting from scratch, then you're going to have to look at it this totally differently. But if you're in the process or you already have a way to produce content, it's a little tweak. But consider the business decisions for you to see what is the best approach. So for the show notes for this episode, please go to kimdsnyder.com/061.